So I've started with a false footing over 4 pinholes in exactly the same way I did with the top of the cherry, and we're going to add the 2 pairs going across the work again like we did with the cherry, but I'm going to do it slightly differently with this one because we're setting up to do a decorative braid pretty much from the start. So I started at pin F. I worked false footing over 4 pairs to the left, as I say, exactly the same way as I did with the cherry. So I'm going to add my 4 pairs on the next pin to the left of the false footing underneath the edge pair, and again I'm going to add them open round the pin in that space, so open like a rainbow. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4, and leaving the 2 pairs on the left behind. The 2 right hand pairs I'm going to work through from left to right, so starting with this pair and just working through in cloth stitch through all but the last pair. Again, because it's the start, all the pairs are a little bit slip slidey. So that's the first pair across, and then the second pair. You can always put a pin in the 2 left hand pairs to stop them pulling as you work the right hand pairs across the work. It just stops those bobbins from sliding in. So now I've got those across the work. So I've got an edge pair on the right hand side. I've got the 2 passives working across. I've got the 8 passive pairs hanging straight down. Then I've got the 2 other passives that are going across on the left hand side, and then I've got the edge pair on the left here, and this pin here we're going to reuse again in a moment. So with the cherry I picked up one of the outside pairs to be the worker, but with the meandering braid, which we're going to use for this piece, we need to create a second worker. So if we imagine that we've got a worker at the right hand side, which I'll explain in a minute, we need to create a second worker here, and we're going to take that from the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th passive in from the end. So counting in from the left hand side, we've got our edge pair, and then 1, 2, 3 passives, and then we're going to take the 4th and the 5th passive pair, and we're going to work cloth stitch and twist with those. Tension up, and then the left hand of these pairs is going to be our new worker, so I'm going to take that to the left through 1, 2, 3 pairs, twist twice, make my edge stitch, cloth stitch and 2 twists, and I'm going to remove that pin that I used to put in the 2 extra pairs and place it under the new worker. Tension up gently there. And then coming over to the right hand side of the work, we have the edge pair, our 2 passive pairs that go across the top of the work, and then this 4th pair in will be our worker. So we're going to start working this braid. So as you can see here, as I say, we've got 2 workers, and we've just taken the left hand one out to the left hand side, and we've just identified the pair that's going to be the worker on the right hand side. So to create this braid, we work part way through the braid and we do a turning stitch here. And this is a locking stitch that helps to tension up the braid. And then we return out to the outside edge before coming in and doing another turning stitch before returning to the outside of the braid. Then we leave the worker behind there and we come to the other side and we pick up the second worker, and that comes in and does a turning stitch and comes out, then back in, do a turning stitch and comes out again. So this gives us a nice meander, and I'll show you how I tension up to get the meander to sit nicely. So what will happen here is you will place 2 pins on one side, and then you'll see that the pin I've placed there is a little bit lower down than the next pin on the other side. So let's go back to the lace. So starting from the right hand side, we've got the worker has already come through 2 pairs. So we're going to take it through 1 more pair of passives, and then the instruction says to twist the worker twice. Then I'm going to take the worker through 3 more pairs of passives. This is all worked in cloth stitch. And then I'm going to do a turning stitch with the 4th pair. Now this has got a twist on it because that's where we did the cloth stitch and twist to create the new pair of workers. So I'm going to do a turning stitch here, which is 5 movements. So cross, twist, cross, twist, cross. Then I'm going to leave the inner pair behind, and I'm going to take the outer pair back to the edge. So through 3 pairs in cloth stitch, twist twice, through 3 more pairs in cloth stitch, twist twice, work my edge stitch of cloth stitch and 2 twists, pin up under 2 pairs, and tension. And now this is the point. So I came in, did my turning stitch and came back out to the edge, and this is the point where I'm going to tension. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see that a little clearer. So I'm just tensioning each bobbin back towards where I made that turning stitch, and I'm just holding on to the worker and the outside edge pair as I do so. So now I'm going to tension the pair with the turning stitch and the pair I've used as the worker, just to get that turning stitch where I want it to be. And in this case, I want it to sit just to the right of the centre of the braid, or around the centre of the braid, and just level or above that pinhole that I've placed. And I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to bring the worker in, 1, 2, 3 pairs, twist twice, 1, 2, 3 pairs, work a turning stitch, so cross, twist, cross, twist, cross, leave the innermost pair behind and come back with the outer pair through 3 pairs in cloth stitch, twist twice, through 3 more pairs in cloth stitch, twist twice, work my edge stitch and pin under both pairs, tension up my worker and the edge pair, hold on to those, and then tension each pair back till I get to the other pair that I used to work the turning stitch with. So you can be reasonably firm. And again, I'm going to grab the turning stitch pair and my edge pair, and I'm positioning that so that the turning stitch sits just above the pinhole on the right hand side. So there's my pinhole on the right hand side, and I'm looking ever so slightly up to the turning stitch. And the reason I'm doing this is because we're now going to go over to the other side of the work, and we're going to be coming in and out to do a turning stitch and placing a pin here which is ever so slightly higher up than the pin on the right hand side, and that's so that we get the meander. So going over to the left hand side, I'm going to pick up my worker, so cloth stitch through 1, 2, 3 pairs, twist twice, cloth stitch through 1, 2, 3 pairs, and these are the centre meander pairs, and then I'm going to work a turning stitch with the 4th, so cross, twist, cross, twist, cross, back, leave the inner pair, so the pair at the centre of the braid where it is, and return with the other pair, back through 1, 2, 3, twist twice, through 3 more passives, twist twice, work my edge stitch, pin under 2 pairs, tension up my edge stitch and my worker and hold on to them, then tension back through the passives, just tugging each pair in turn till I get back to that pair that was the other pair that I was using for the turning stitch. So again, I'm going to tension that up so that I can position the thread kind of level, the inner pair kind of level with the outer pair, and when I've got that where I want it, I'm going to tension those passives again, just so that I don't get the kinking up in the braid. Then I'm going to repeat that from the left hand side, so the worker comes in through 1, 2, 3, twist twice, 1, 2, 3, work my turning stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is your cross, twist, cross, twist, cross. Leaving the pair in the middle of the braid behind, come back with the other pair through 1, 2, 3, twist twice, 1, 2, 3, twist twice, work my edge stitch, that's cloth stitch and 2 twists, and pin under 2 pairs. Tension up the worker and the edge pair and hold on to those while I just put some tension on the passives, working back in towards the centre of the braid until I get to that partner pair that I did the turning stitch with. Tensioning that up so that I'm lifting that turning stitch up just a little bit above the pin, and then put a bit more tension on those passives there before I return to the right hand side of the braid. So I shall go through that again with you. So coming from this side, I'm going to pick up the worker and I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3 pairs, twist twice, one, 2, 3 pairs, work my turning stitch with the next pair, so cross, twist, cross, twist, cross, leaving the pair in the middle of the braid behind. I shall come back with the outer pair through 3 pairs, twist twice, 3 more pairs, twist twice, work my edge stitch and pin, tension up my worker and the edge pair, tension in on my passives one by one until I get to that turning stitch pair, I'm going to tension with the turning stitch pair and my edge stitch to get it where I want it to be. And can you see here, I'm just getting a little bit of a kink up with the passives there. So this is the point where I get that into the position I want it to be. Then holding on to that turning stitch, I'm going to give another tug to those passives, and can you see they're just going to settle back down again. So you really do, Melanie, I cannot stress enough, these decorative braids, especially where there's a turning stitch, it's all about tension. So you're constantly tensioning. So I'll come in a second time. So 1, 2, 3 pairs in cross stitch, twist twice. 1, 2, 3 pairs in cross stitch. Now I'm going to work my turning stitch, so cross, twist, cross, twist, cross. Come back out, 1, 2, 3 pairs in cross stitch, twist twice. 1, 2, 3 pairs in cross stitch, twist twice. Work my edge stitch and pin up under 2 pairs. Again, I'm going to tension the worker and the edge pair and hold on to those while I tension the passives in until I get to that inside pair that I did the turning stitch with. Give that the tension and get the passives again where I need them to be. And I want that just that little bit higher up, so I'm just going to wiggle that turning stitch pair and tension on the passives to ease that higher up to get my angle. So that's 2 on the right again. We'll go back over to the left hand side, pick up the worker from there. 1, 2, 3, twist twice. 1, 2, 3 through those center pairs for the meander, turning stitch with the next pair, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come leave the inner one behind, come back to the outside, so 1, 2, 3 passives, twist twice, 1, 2, 3, twist twice, work my edge stitch and pin. Tension up the edge and the worker, tension my passives, till I get to that pair that I did the turning stitch with, and you can see where it's quite a kink. I'm going to have to add a little bit more tension on those passives to get it to sit where I want it to sit. That's better. Come in again. Now this is the last pinhole on the left hand side before it meets the edge of the cherry. So I'm going to come in with the worker, but when I come back out I'll be doing a sewing rather than an edge stitch. So 1, 2, 3, twist twice, 1, 2, 3, make a turning stitch, cross, twist, cross, twist, cross, come back out, 1, 2, 3, twist twice, 1, 2, 3, and this time I'm going to be doing a sewing into this pinhole. So this pinhole, which is where the braid kind of meets the cherry, the top bar will be where I sew in the edge pair, and the bottom bar is where I'm going to sew in this pair. So I've put no twists on the worker because I want to keep that up to the edge of the cherry. I don't want a gap. So I'll go under the bottom bar, pick up my worker, bring the partner through, and now I can do my tensioning. So I'm going to pull that worker, sit that worker right across rather than down. I want it to the side. So I'm going to tension in again until I get to that partner where I did the turning stitch with. Give that little tug to get that where I want it to be. So that's 2 on the left, and then I'll go back and I'll do 2 on the right. Now the joy of this braid is you can, to get round the curve, if I zoom out a little bit, when you come down to here, you've got quite a curve to get round. So you can use your inner pinholes more than once, and you will need to do that, especially when you get to the last bit, when you finish the braid. But on the outside of the curve, you can come in, so where in the pattern you come in and do 2 turning stitches on the outside of the braid, and then do the same on the inside. When you're going around the outside of the curve, you can come in and out, and then you can come in and out and do a 3rd turning stitch. And this just helps, just to give you a little bit more. You're using more pinholes on the outside of the braid than you are on the inside, which helps you to get round the curve. So I'm going to carry on working down this braid now, and I'll show you as I get further round to the bend how I'm dealing with that in the braid. So I've progressed a little bit further along the braid, and I'm just coming to the point here where I'd completed the tapered roll on the cherry section. So I mentioned that I'd left the ends long, ready for when I work the next braid. So I'm just going to show you how I deal with that to make sure that the ends of the previous section don't push through to the front. So I'm going to work the braid as normal. So coming in through 3, twist twice, in through 3 more, work my turning stitch, come back, so I'm ready to do my sewing. So we've got the added complication. If I can just reach in there, I can take the pin out that's holding those loose ends. So I'm just going to separate the 2 threads that are nearest the pinhole that I'm about to do the sewing in. So keeping the threads out of the way, I'm going to lift the pin in the pinhole and work my sewing. And what I'm doing is, as I'm working the sewing, I'm just making sure that that end of those threads just keep out of the way. So I'm just going to move those over here. Then what happens is, when I cut those off, they're much less likely to work their way through to the front of the work. So I've done my sewing there, do my tensioning. So that's my 3 outer pairs. Then start tensioning the braid till I get to that turning stitch pair. So the braid's got a bit narrower here. So then come in and do my second repeat from this side. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Work my turning stitch. Come back, 2, 3, twist twice. 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tensioning before I do that sewing. And then again I'm going to find the pair of threads for that pinhole. Ease them up out of the way. Work my sewing. Tension again so that the braid is sitting as I want it to, and that the meander is going where I want it to. And then I'll be heading over to the right hand side. So I'm just literally, you're watching what those threads are doing, making sure they don't get caught up, so that if you'd cut those tight, then when you made the sewing it would push those little ends of your knots through to the other side, and this way they'll stay on this outside on the back of your work. So I'll just carry back on again, working down that braid. So I'm getting a good way down on the braid now, and for the last few pinholes on the inside I've started using both sidebars to help start to bring the curve round. But I know now that from this point on I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 pinholes on the left hand side, and I've got 12 on the outside. So if I use each of the sidebars twice on the left hand side, that gives me 8 on the left. So I've still got 4 more on the outside to deal with. So what I'm going to do now is I'll continue using both sidebars of the pinholes on the left hand side, but on the right hand side I'm going to do a third in and out with the worker, which will help me gain further around the outside of the braid. So exactly as we've done before, where you come in, do the turning stitch and work out, but instead of doing it twice I'm going to do it 3 times. Now this does stretch out the curve of the braid, but it's still, I think it's the neatest way of getting around the turn. So do my turning stitch here, come back out, and these meanders are really useful braids for getting round curves like this, because you can do exactly that. The other kind of braid that works really well for this kind of curve is a figure of 8, where you come in and do a turning stitch halfway through the braid. So anything that you've got a turning stitch part way through the width of the braid is one way you can use that to your advantage to gain pinholes around the outside of a curve. So that's 1. That's the second one, and then I'll do one more. There you go. You can see that that meander to the right is just a little bit bigger than the one on the left, but it helps to bring that round. So I've done 3 turning stitches on the outside, then I'll go back to the inside and I'll use that pinhole twice and do 2 turning stitches there. So you've used 1 pinhole on the inside and 3 on the outside. So 4 on the inside would make 12 on the outside, but of course the very end will be going back into cloth stitch. So I'm probably going to do a couple more pattern repeats now. So I've done 2.5 pattern repeats now, where I've used both sides of the pinhole on the inside, and I've used 3 turning stitches on the outside of the braid. So you can see that it doesn't make a massive difference in terms of appearance, but it just helps you get round that curve. So I'm now at the point where I've got 2 pinholes left on the inside and I've got 3 pinholes left on the outside. So I've got potentially 4 sewings on the inside and 3 pins on the outside to work. And now I need to start getting rid of pairs quite quickly, and to get round to that point. So I'm going to finish the braid. So I'm going to finish it in much the same way as I did when I started it. So if I just show you the diagram. So when we started the braid, we created a second worker by working a cloth stitch and twist with these two passive pairs. So what I'm going to do is at the bottom, on the side opposite where I've just done the turning stitches, I'm going to bring the worker in and work it with a cloth stitch with the 4th passive in from the edge, so that then that drops down to become passive, and then I'll carry on with the worker from the outside. So I'll show you what I mean. So my worker is at the outside there. I've done the turning stitches on the right hand side, and I'm going to lose the worker on the left hand side. So I'm going to bring the worker from the left through 3 pairs of passives. I'm going to put a twist on the worker because when we created the new worker at the top of the braid, I did a cloth stitch and twist, so we finished with the twist on the worker. And then I'm going to take the innermost pair from the meander and I'm going to put a twist on that, and then I'm going to cloth stitch those 2 pairs together. So that's the worker from the left and the innermost pair from the meander, and then those are now just passive pairs, and I can go back to the outside edge, pick up my worker, and now I'm just going to be working in cloth stitch. But I need to start reducing pairs quite quickly now, because with only 3 pins on the outside and 4 sewings on the inside, that's only 7 rows to get to sort of down to 3 pairs, and I've got 14 pairs, so I've got 11 pairs to lose over 7 rows. So some of the rows I'm going to take out 2 pairs. So I'll start off just with 1 in the middle. I'll take it out from this meander. So again, the right hand thread of 2 adjacent pairs. Lay that back, working cloth stitch across the row. So because we're coming out of the braid into cloth stitch, it will take a row or two for everything to settle down into place. And there's a lot going on because we're reducing pairs as well. So this time I'm going to sew into the top of that top side bar of that pinhole. Again, I've put no twists on the worker because I want it to be solid right up to the edge of the braid. Tension that up. So I want to gradually bring, just turning that slightly. So I want all these pairs to gradually fill out that section. As I say, over the first couple of rows, that will happen. More so when I'm tensioning on the outside of the braid, I think. Making sure that, see that meander is, I don't want it to pull out. So I'm concentrating on keeping the tension into the middle of the braid. So I'll lay another pair out, so I'll take it from towards the inside edge here, I think this time. So that's my worker. Let's take the next one. And again, when I lay them out, I'm putting them in order so that I can just come along and tie them off at the end. So this still looks quite open, but because the braid is narrowing in quite quickly, it will tighten up. In fact, once I put this pin in, you'll probably see that it will tighten up quite fast. Again, tension up, holding on to that edge pair in the worker. I can put tension on the passives. So already they're starting to fill in. Those ones from the left, I'm just going to give them a slightly less firmer tug. So already, can you see that's really packing in? So I'm going to take a couple of pairs out this row. So I'm going to take one there from the right, and we'll take one from the left. Then another row in cloth stitch. And then I can sew into the bottom side bar of that pinhole. And again, that's because that's bringing it in tight. That's going to bunch up the passives in that last little bit of cloth stitch, so it will help secure the ones that we're sort of laying out. So again, tension up. It's looking a little bit untidy at this stage, but it does come back. Again, take a pair out there. We'll just take the one out that row. So what I'm doing is I'm watching how full the braid is looking. If it starts to look too sparse, then I won't take two pairs out. So this one, this row, again, it's going to pull it in tighter again. So I can probably get away with taking a couple of pairs out because I need to get them out quite quickly, as I said. So this is really getting tight now. So we'll definitely have to lose two pairs this row, and probably two pairs every row from now on. And lay a pair out there, and a pair out there. But they're reducing quite quickly now. So I've got this last pin hole here. So working the top sidebar of that pinhole. Tension up. Another 2 pairs come out here. Work back. We're getting right down to the end now. So we're down to 1. We've got 4 pairs left. So we can take out one last one of the passives, bring the worker through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew that worker off into the bar that I just previously sewn into. So I'll use that a second time. You can use your judgment a little bit with your individual piece of lace and sew into the sidebar that just feels right. So I'm going to tie that off in a reef knot and a half. And then this last passive and the edge pair I'm going to sew off into that lower sidebar. Let's get that out of the way. I'll sew those off into this lower sidebar, and then these will be the 2 pairs that I will use to roll back round the edge of the work. So I'm only going to put a reef knot on those. I don't need the bulk of the extra half a reef knot when these are going to be rolled back round the edge. So that's 1. And then the worker, the edge pair. Oops, that's hooked around the pin. So these 2 pairs, the last 2 pairs that I've sewn in, will roll back around the edge. On the other side, where the edge pair joins the lace, I can now sew that pair in to the sidebar there. And tie that off. Now I'm going to tie that off in just a reef knot, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So you now have a choice. We're going to roll around the edge with 2 pairs. So you've got a choice here. You can either take the 2 pairs at the end, roll them all the way round back to this point here, and sew both the pairs in along with this sewing at this pinhole here, or you can do what I intend to do, and that is to add a further pair at this point where I've finished it off here, and then I'm going to roll back with 2 pairs in this direction, then 2 pairs back from the end of the braid, and I'm going to work a tapered roll with the knots here, and then they'll be tucked out of the way behind the edge of the next braid in the same way that the ends from the cherry did here. I just think it gives a neater finish to hide the knots along the side here than it does having visible knots on the edge here. So you're going to work the second braid in exactly the same way. The third braid has got an extra 2 pairs in it, so when you're doing the start point you need to allow for an extra passive pair on either side of the braid. So where you come in through 3 pairs on this braid, you'll come in through 4 on this wider one, And then where I've marked the pattern with 2 asterisks, you'll need to lay out one of the passive pairs from either side of the braid at that point before carrying on with just 14 pairs, and then just finishing it off in exactly the same way you finished the first 2 braids. So that's everything you need to know to complete the icing of your cupcake. Watch out for the next video where I'll be showing you how to work the panels for the cupcake case, where we're introducing a number of different shades, so that has an impact on how you start the pairs off and lay in the colours at the beginning. Thank you for watching.